Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining today's weekly Wednesday webinar, our 5-minute brainstorm. This week, we're going to talk about creating a death file. My name is Chris Orestes, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. So let's start by addressing the obvious, and that is that people really underestimate the challenges that come into play based on declining health, incapacitation, or death to the family. These things can creep up on people over time, or they can hit suddenly, but either way, it is always underestimated the logistics and the administrative aspects of handling these situations when they hit a loved one and how it will spill across the family. So all that can be done in terms of advanced planning for the eventuality that someone's going to need either long-term care or some form of emergency medical care should involve the family members, so they have a clear understanding of the wishes that the loved one has and the resources they have available to them. Doing this as part of smart planning is creating what we call a death file. And this is a planning tool that contains everything the family is going to need to execute someone's wishes, tending to their financial duties while under duress, or making sure that their estate is handled without problem. So a death file is going to give a family the tools and the information to understand the wishes of the individual, and then what they need to know when it comes to both healthcare and financial decisions and resources that are available. And in creating a death file, you're going to compile a variety of information, and I'm going to go through the top 10 items that should be in a death file that then is readily available. Family members understand that it exists, where it is, how they access it, if somebody finds themselves in a position that they're unable to tend to these matters for themselves. So death file item number 1 is the contact information for doctors, attorneys, financial advisors, and accountants for the individual. And so ask yourself this question: when it comes to, say, a loved one, maybe your parents, siblings, do you know this information off the top of your head if all of a sudden something were to happen? The answer is probably no. So gathering this information and having it in one place is going to be important if it comes time to act on somebody's behalf. Number 2, you also want to make sure there's written instructions that will address any specific requests for care, such as a preference for the type of care, the location of care, who caregivers may be, whether it's long-term care or emergency medical care. You want to make sure that if there are preferences, that those have been identified for the individuals to be able to then act on. Item number 3, you want to make sure that there's a medical power of attorney in place that names the person who would manage the healthcare decisions of an individual unable to do so for themselves. Again, you want to make sure that there's the correct contact information for doctors. And then if there's any medical directives, such as do not resuscitate, do not intubate, and any other specific requests and directions that somebody needs to know if someone is unable to speak for themselves in a healthcare situation, that could, quite frankly, be a matter of life or death. A financial power of attorney should also be in place. It's naming who will handle the financial matters for the individual. So a well-planned file is going to contain both a medical power of attorney and a financial power of attorney, 2 different documents that give 2 different specific directives that will kick into place only when somebody is incapacitated. Then you want to make sure that there's a will in place, and any potential trust documents, potentially a will with a testamentary trust that specifies how someone's estate is going to be handled. What no one should put themselves in a position, themselves and their family, is to die intestate without a will in place. because they will then end up tied up in probate court for months, if not years, attending to somebody's estate. Having a will with the appropriate potential trust documents, if the income and assets warrant it, is critical. And as part of that, you want to make sure that you specify any special instructions for personal effects and property, including things like ownership of vehicles, other properties, real estate. Something that is overlooked, storage units. You want to make sure if there's storage units containing any items, specialty assets that need to be dealt with in a specific way. This is the place that you want to make sure that you're not leaving any mysteries out there, and these items are being addressed very specifically. You're going to want to make sure that there's a mortgage statement and any deeds for real estate that's owned in the file. Bank statements for all bank accounts, including any information on safety deposit boxes, another thing that is sometimes overlooked. And then any mortgage, loan, or let's say reverse mortgage statements that potentially could have been taken out against a property. So anything relative to loans or mortgages on a property, information about that property should be in the file. Retirement accounts. If you have IRAs, if you have pension accounts, you want to make sure any of those retirement accounts have statements so that the family can contact and work with the managers of those accounts appropriately. Also, if there's health insurance, if there's a health insurance policy, if somebody's collecting Medicare, if they've got Medicare coverage, everybody's Medicare coverage is different. So you want to make sure that there's information about the Medicare coverage in the file. If anybody's getting veterans benefits, veterans health care, like TRICARE, maybe they're collecting veterans aid and attendance benefits. You want to make sure anything related to veterans benefits would be in there with health insurance or Medicare coverage information. And then beyond health insurance and health coverage, life insurance policies, long-term care policies, DI policies, and any information on annuities that might be owned. So anything in the category of insurance, at a minimum, statements, if not the policies themselves, should be gathered and contained in the file. And then last but not least, anything related to funeral planning, final wishes. If there's a funeral trust in place, any prepaid funeral plans, a final expense insurance policy, you want that information in the file as well as any specific written directions for funeral arrangements, any special requests, any guidance on anything that should be enacted around a funeral. This would be the place to make sure that those instructions are contained and easily found by the family. So organizing and clearly communicating what a person wants is going to help eliminate the uncertainty and the mistakes that can come if it's all left open-ended. You don't want to put yourself and the family in a position of scrambling to try and piece together a puzzle of where are documents, what accounts are there, is there insurance, is there not? I can't tell you how often we'll talk to a family, say regarding something like a life settlement, and they'll say to us, you know, I know my mother or my father has a life insurance policy. I'm not sure what it is. I've never seen it, but we want to do something with it. And then they've got to dig and try and find it. And oftentimes they have a very difficult time getting their hands on that kind of information. Just as an example, you want to make sure that with the death file, you're clearly articulating what your wishes are and containing in that file all the necessary documentation to execute on those wishes, financially, medical, funeral, and anything you can do to help with managing the estate after the passing of the loved one. So that concludes today's 5-minute brainstorm, creating a death file. This session will be recorded and sent out to everybody who participated. Appreciate having everybody joining us today and joining us every week for our weekly Wednesday webinar. We'll see you again next week for another session of the 5-minute brainstorm.